Wow. Good evening, everyone. Okay, let's try that. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Okay, I know you're awake. Great. Well, hello. Welcome to NYU School of Law. My name is Troy McKenzie. I have the privilege of being the dean of this law school. And I want to welcome everyone to this, the 27th annual Attorney General Robert Abrams Public Service Lecture. This is one of the most significant events on our calendar each year because for the last 27 years, this lecture has been and continues to be a hallmark event celebrating our public servants and their dedication to the rule of law. The thunder is not a response to what I just said, by the way. That's totally separate. That's cheering for this, exactly. And the goal of this lecture is really to showcase leading voices from the public sector to foster intellectual dialogue on pressing issues facing law and government. And most importantly, and selfishly from my perspective, it is our chance to honor and thank one of our most esteemed alumni, the Honorable Robert Abrams. This year, you will be hearing from our speaker, North Carolina's Attorney General, Josh Stein. Unfortunately, he tested positive for COVID-19, so we will be conducting this lecture in hybrid format, but he will be able to take questions from the floor afterwards. One thing we learned from the pandemic is that we can pivot quickly when circumstances require and still interact in a meaningful way. Bob Abrams will formally introduce Attorney General Stein in a few minutes, but let me just again reiterate how delighted we are to hear from Bob today. The Honorable Robert Abrams is truly an example of dedication to public service and an inspiration to everyone in the NYU community. He had a 28-year career in government, member of the New York State Assembly. He served 3 terms as the Bronx Borough President, and he was then elected to serve, in 1978, to serve the first of 4 terms as Attorney General of the state of New York. And he truly was a reforming and pioneering Attorney General. He built his reputation as an active advocate who used the power of the law in service of consumers, the environment, in order to advocate for reform in finance, the nonprofit sector, the civil rights sector, and also to ensure fairness in the real estate market in this state. And over the years, more than 250 of his legislative proposals were passed and signed into law. After his time as Attorney General of this state, he then went on to a distinguished career in private practice and nevertheless retained a strong interest in public service. So he has been a tireless advocate and a diligent public servant, and I can also assure you that he is an energetic part of putting this lecture together every year. This really does bear his imprimatur. So without any further ado, please welcome Robert Abrams.
Thanks so much, Dean McKenzie. It's great to be at this law school, and it's wonderful to be with the dean. He's just finished his first year. The students are so enthusiastic about his leadership, the faculty, the alumni. You hear only great things about Dean McKenzie. And
Give it time.
Constantly displaying a good sense of humor. So it's an honor to share the platform with the dean. I want to thank people who work hard to make sure that we all gather every year. Lisa Hoyes, the Assistant Dean for Public Service, and a young woman who has been so fantastically effective over the last couple of years in doing all the detail work, Maddie Dioka, for her dedication, and especially when heard that we have a little bit of a disruption this year. You know, you learn in law school a lot of things, and this law school prepares you to be a very good lawyer, and you have to be ready on your feet for all circumstances. And so when the word came down that the dean, unfortunately, the Attorney General of North Carolina, unfortunately, had COVID, tested positive for COVID, we had to work quickly to try to make sure that we would get the benefit of his energy and all that he represents still to be presented to everybody here today, and we're lucky that it worked out. This is the 27th lecture, and it's not the first time we've had a last-minute challenge. Janet Napolitano, who was the Attorney General of Arizona, later became the governor. She was a scheduled speaker, and then to the last minute we had a phone call saying, you know, unfortunately, Bob, there's a prison riot and a prison disturbance at a key place in our state, and the Attorney General just can't leave, so we were able to mobilize a hookup, and that worked out. There was another time when the governor of Oregon, Ted Kulingowski, he was the Attorney General and got elected to be governor. Before that, he was the Commissioner of Labor, and he's a great advocate for labor, and there happened to be a labor dispute at the university at that point in time. And the word was that there might be a picket line in front of some of the university buildings, so this was a sensitive issue, and we had to scamper around, but we solved it. Judson Memorial Church is not a building of the university. It's only a block and a half down, and we were able to hold a lecture at the Judson Memorial Church. And tonight, we're doing the same thing with Attorney General Josh Stein, and I want to thank him. You're going to see him in a few minutes. For his willingness to do this, notwithstanding this current circumstance. Why did we start this program? There's a portrait of John Sexton, one of the deans of the law school over there. A lady became the president of the university. I went to John some 27 years ago and said, John, you know, I'm worried. I loved politics. I loved public service. I did it for 28 years. It's being portrayed so negatively in the press that a lot of the young people, I fear, are turned off. They think that politics is totally corrupt, that it's tawdry, that you're going to get dirty and tarnished if you get involved in it, if you play a role in a political campaign, or if you become a candidate. And so, you know, and John, we need these young people. We need their idealism. We need their enthusiasm. We need their willingness to shake up the system, to try to make changes and improve things that aren't so great in our society. And we got to get them to roll up their sleeves and jump into the fray and not get turned off and walk away. And so, you know, John, look, there are people who are not so good in government and politics, and there are some very good people, and then there are some outstanding people that I met. And I think the students should get a perspective, a view, a full view of what's going on. And I want them to meet in the flesh some of the outstanding people who serve in public life across the country. And for 27 years, we've been presenting those kinds of people. And tonight is no exception. And even though it's virtual, I think you're going to get a good sense of who Josh Stein is and learn from him and be inspired by him. So let me tell you a few words about him. He grew up in North Carolina, went to Chapel Hill High School, played on the soccer team. Went to Dartmouth College. After Dartmouth, he went to Zimbabwe in Africa to spend 2 years to teach English and economics. Came back, went to Harvard Law School, went to the John F. Kennedy School of Government and Public Service, came back to North Carolina, got involved with the Self-Help Credit Union, got involved with an organization that was dealing with domestic violence issues, got involved in civil rights issues. He got his inspiration from his father. His father was a remarkable man, a fantastic, courageous litigator on civil rights issues throughout the South, when the South was truly segregated. And in fact, he formed the first integrated law firm in the state of North Carolina. So it's in the genes. And Josh went ahead and he entered politics. He got involved in a campaign and he helped elect John Edwards to the United States Senate. He eventually decided to run himself for the state Senate in North Carolina. And it was a tough race in the primary, in the general election. He won. And as soon as he got to the state Senate, his colleagues saw that this is an exceptional guy. He was elected by his colleagues to be the minority whip. And then he eventually ran for attorney general, tough race again, primary, general election. And he won and became attorney general and did all the right things and the good things that we expect an independent, intelligent person of ethics to be in a leadership position. He took strong positions on women's right to choose, strong position on gun control, strong position on veterans' rights, on the setbacks that civil rights was experiencing all across the country, voting rights. Went ahead and filed important lawsuits to protect the Affordable Care Act that was enacted, guaranteeing finally in this country universal health care for people, irrespective of your earning power and who you are in the nation. He collected money for the people of his state, Medicaid fraud, went after the fraudsters and got over $260 million returned to the coffers in the treasury of his state. The opioid epidemic, attorneys general played a very strong leadership role, and Josh Stein was out there in the forefront. And they collected, believe it or not, an astonishing over $50 billion from those who perpetrated the harm all across this nation during the opioid crisis, the pharmaceutical companies, the distribution companies, and gave that money to the states and to rehabilitation programs. So here's a guy who not only talks the talk, but walks the walk and has the courage to do the right thing. He's now running for governor. Not easy to do successfully as a Democrat in the state of North Carolina. The current governor is a wonderful guy, Roy Cooper, who served as the Attorney General of North Carolina, a friend of mine who I admire greatly as well. A couple of years ago, we had another Josh here at this microphone. He was also an Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, the Attorney General of Pennsylvania. And today his title is the Governor of Pennsylvania. I suspect that that might happen once again. Another Josh Stein running. It's not guaranteed, but he's a fighter, and he's a gutsy guy, and he may not win by a huge margin, but I think he's going to be able to prevail in this race. So it's my privilege, my honor, to enthusiastically welcome, even virtually, and to thank him, his willingness to do this, even though he tested positive for COVID, the great Attorney General of North Carolina, Josh Stein.
Bob, that was wonderful. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to just do a sound check. Give me a thumbs up if y'all can hear me pretty well. That's great. Dean McKenzie, thank you for being here tonight. I regret not being there to be with you all in person. I am pleased to be able to join you, even if it's just by video. I do think that given that I have COVID, I think everyone in the room is quite pleased that I am not there in person. When Attorney General Bob Abrams asked me to do this, I was deeply honored, and I really didn't have much of a choice. When Bob asks you to do something, you step up, particularly when it's on a topic like public service. He has had a remarkable career serving others and has had truly a path-breaking, really precedent-setting role in shaping the notion of what a modern attorney general can do all across this country. And I think not everyone appreciates that what we do is in large measure because Bob paved the way for us. Bob, thank you. Thank you for those kind words. And I compliment NYU Law School for the good sense of naming your public service lecture after Robert Abrams. I can think of no better time nor place to discuss the concept of public service than September 11th in New York. I expect that any of the students in the room are very likely without much personal memory of what happened on September 11th, 2001, but every older American can tell you precisely where they were and what they were doing that awful morning. I began my day, it was a bright and sunny day in Boston, but I needed to get back to Raleigh for a legislative hearing on payday lending. And so I caught a 7:30 a.m. flight out of Logan to go to RDU. And I was later chilled to learn that 2 of the planes that were hijacked also left from Logan not long after I had departed. And I flew right by New York, and I looked out and saw Long Island. And if I had not gotten distracted by my reading, I would have seen the last glimpse of the World Trade Centers. When I landed at RDU, the airport was already shut down. I didn't understand why. I was very confused. And then in the hours and days that followed, like all Americans, I was in a daze, both horrified at the loss of human life and at this concerted attack on our nation, which we didn't even know really who had attacked us initially. But one thing that I remember vividly, and I think everyone else who was alive then does as well, are all the stories that we both read and heard about the heroes of September 11th, the police officers and firefighters who risked and often gave their lives to rescue others, the service members at the Pentagon who responded to the attack, the courageous regular people on Flight 93 who overtook the hijackers, gained control of the plane, or at least got into the cockpit, knowing that they were almost certain to die themselves, but doing so to protect some unknown target and the people who were there. All the construction workers who worked feverishly at the World Trade Center in the vain hope of finding survivors. And then all of the other people who served the people in whatever way they could fashion, whether it was feeding first responders who were working around the clock, or donating blood for victims, or finding any other way to be of service to other people at that awful time in our nation's history. Lifting up heroes, both those who put their lives at risk for others and those who simply dedicate themselves to helping others, is critically important, I believe, for at least a couple of reasons. First, I believe it's simply right and proper to express our profound gratitude for the bravery and sacrifice that some make on behalf of the rest of us. And of course, that sacrifice too often extends to the families who lose their loved ones. Second, by recognizing heroes and their service, we identify the characteristics and behavior that we hope to see in others and in ourselves, setting an example to which we can all aspire. One person who has done that for me, Bob already referenced, my father, Adam Stein. He's actually a proud graduate of NYU undergrad. He then went to George Washington Law School. And after his first year of law school, 1965, he was awarded an NAACP Legal Defense Fund fellowship to intern for a solo practitioner named Julius Chambers in Charlotte, North Carolina. Chambers was a truly remarkable lawyer. He had graduated just a few years previously from UNC Law School, first in his class and editor-in-chief of the Law Review. And I don't need to tell a bunch of law school students and faculty just how rare it is to combine both of those accomplishments, because editing the Law Review takes up so much time, it's hard to keep your grades up. Yet, when he graduated law school in Chapel Hill in North Carolina, he could not get a job with a single white shoe law firm, which is all he wanted to do in the state of North Carolina, for the simple reason that Chambers was Black. So he opened up his solo practice in Charlotte, near where he grew up. And after my dad finished law school in 1967, he joined Chambers and another young associate, James Ferguson, a graduate of Columbia Law School, both of whom are also heroes of mine. The three of them formed North Carolina's first interracial law firm. And they won a number of path-breaking civil rights victories, benefiting the entire country in addition to North Carolina. Cases involving school desegregation, employment non-discrimination, integration of restaurants and other public accommodations, and voting rights. They were absolutely committed to destroying Jim Crow and making our nation honor the promises written in the Constitution and in our laws. They would not be deterred from their pursuit of equality, even when someone firebombed their law office and burned it to the ground. Chambers' car was firebombed. His home was also firebombed. I learned early on as a young person that some things are worth fighting for, and it doesn't matter who is on the other side. I also learned that our Constitution and laws exist for the people, and that's all of the people, not just the well-heeled and well-connected, not just the powerful and the privileged, but also the farmer, the factory worker, and the first responder, the small business owner and the secretary, school teachers and students, veterans and voters, for everyone. And in my life and work, I've seen how we can make the law work for the people if we are prepared to do that work. And that's what we have tried to do at the North Carolina Department of Justice. Take on big fights for the people of North Carolina and deliver for them. I'm going to take drinks periodically, so please excuse me. At the Department of Justice, we have fought for people who are struggling with addiction by taking on the opioid drug companies, manufacturers, distributors, and pharmacy chains. We've taken them to court for their role in creating and fueling the opioid crisis. And as Bob mentioned, we're winning more than $55 billion so far. We just announced another $1.3 billion resolution with Kroger, a national pharmacy chain through grocery stores. Almost all of it has to help people who are struggling with addiction enjoy a healthier and happier future. We protect kids and keep them safe by holding accountable companies that are hooking them in a variety of different ways. It could be opioids, it could be e-cigarettes, it could be social media companies. We bring justice to victims of sexual assault by tackling the rape kit backlog in North Carolina, which was the largest in the country. And we're solving cold cases, putting dangerous people behind bars, and making our communities safer. We protect people's drinking water by making polluters pay to clean up the messes that they make. We protect taxpayers by going after tax cheats and healthcare providers defrauding the Medicaid system. We protect seniors, students, and consumers from fraudsters. We protect people from crime. We train law enforcement officers, and we analyze crime scene evidence at the State Crime Lab. And of course, we defend our fundamental constitutional rights. That includes our right to vote and to vote in fair districts. One of the first cases I confronted as Attorney General when I was sworn in January 2017 concerned the right to vote. In 2013, the North Carolina General Assembly passed over my opposition. I was in the state Senate at that time, passed a monster anti-voter law that restricted people's ability to vote in a number of different ways. It eliminated a week of early voting, out of precinct voting, high school pre-registration, and same-day registration and voting, among a number of other provisions. It just so happened that each one of those voting measures, African Americans in North Carolina took advantage of them at a higher rate than did white voters. So, not surprisingly, voters challenged the law. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals held that it targeted African American voters with, quote, almost surgical precision. There were 3 days left in the term of the prior governor, Governor Pat McCrory, when he petitioned the United States Supreme Court to reinstate that law and all of its discriminatory provisions. On behalf of the new governor, Governor Cooper, I successfully withdrew that petition from the Supreme Court because the state of North Carolina should be about protecting people's right to vote, not restricting it. But it's not enough to simply be able to cast your ballot if your ballot is worth less. And that is the evil of partisan gerrymandering. It diminishes, it undermines the value of each person's vote simply based on their political viewpoint. In our democracy, the way it's supposed to work, voters are meant to choose their legislative representatives. But in North Carolina, it was the state legislators who had turned democracy upside down, choosing their voters instead. They have abused the redistricting process to cement themselves in power, no matter the will of the voters. And let me give you some data to explain. Last decade, North Carolina is a 50-50 state. I'll start with that. I can tell you this because I've won each of my elections with 50.2 or 50.5% of the vote. It is a 50-50 state. Last decade, the Republicans in the General Assembly drew a congressional map that produced 10 Republicans and only 3 Democrats in our congressional delegation. In the House floor debate over that map, the Republican bill manager explained that the reason why they didn't make the map 11 Republicans and 2 Democrats was because they couldn't. It was impossible. In this decade's recent redistricting, the Republican majority used sophisticated computer tools to gerrymander maps to discriminate against certain voters based on their political views, making their votes worth less. Some people challenged those maps in state court since the U.S. Supreme Court had previously ruled in a North Carolina case that they were out of the game of adjudicating partisan gerrymanders. They filed a case in state court, and my team and I filed a brief with the North Carolina Supreme Court arguing that partisan gerrymandering in fact violates our state constitution's declared rights to free elections, free speech, free association, equal protection, and popular sovereignty. The North Carolina Supreme Court agreed with our arguments, reaffirming that people possess all political power in North Carolina, both as expressed in the Constitution and as reflected in how they vote. So the court struck down the proposed congressional map and ordered the legislature to draw new, fair ones. The maps that the congressional delegation ran on in 2022 in our 50-50 state, it will shock you all to know, produced 7 Republicans and 7 Democrats to Congress. That was, we picked up a congressional seat. So we went from 13 to 14. The people of North Carolina actually chose their representatives, not the other way around. And that's exactly the way it should work in a democracy. Unfortunately, North Carolina's Republican legislative leaders simply refuse to accept democracy when they can distort the rules to their own advantage. To justify the partisan gerrymander, which had been struck down by the North Carolina Supreme Court, they went to the U.S. Supreme Court, embracing a radical, brand new, so-called independent state legislature theory. And the Supreme Court agreed with their cert petition, granted the case in the Harper versus Moore case. The Republican legislators argued that they can draw congressional districts however they wish, even in express violation of the will of the people as articulated in our state constitution and as interpreted by our state Supreme Court. For them, it is raw power over democracy. It is politicians over people. My office, representing the state of North Carolina, argued the opposite. The state believes that the words in the Constitution have meaning. Our Constitution reads, all political power is vested in and derived from the people. It is founded upon their will only. People, not politicians, possess all political power in North Carolina. As you all know, in this momentous case, one of the most consequential affecting our democracy in decades, if not ever, the court agreed with our argument and the people prevailed. The Supreme Court rejected this radical independent state legislature theory. They ruled that state legislators, like all political actors, remain subject to the state constitutions that create them. They do not somehow exist outside of and above the founding document. And while we're happy with this result for the good of democracy in this country, in North Carolina, we know the fight for democracy never ends. Around the same time that that ruling came down, the Republican General Assembly went back to the state Supreme Court, asking them to rehear the case, and the Supreme Court of North Carolina agreed to rehear this underlying case. Rehearing a case that has already been decided by a Supreme Court is exceptionally rare. It's only it happened 3 times in the previous 30 years in North Carolina. And it was always because either there was a change in the law that governed the case, perhaps a higher court had issued new binding precedent, or because the court simply had misunderstood critical facts that had led them astray. Neither of these things occurred in North Carolina. The only change from the previous year when the case was decided by the Supreme Court was that the composition of our state Supreme Court had changed. After last November's elections, the Republicans won a majority of the seats on the Supreme Court. And in rehearing the case, this newly constituted Supreme Court gave the Republican legislature everything it wanted, empowering them to engage in partisan gerrymandering to their heart's content. Those maps should come out any week now. I believe this decision represents an abuse of the rule of law by our Supreme Court, but until the Congress passes a ban on partisan gerrymandering, it will be a fact of life in North Carolina. And what the focus of people who believe in democracy is to prove the thesis that good organizing can defeat a bad gerrymander. Our entire system of government is designed to protect people against a single party, politician, or branch of government aggregating too much power, because we know that too much power corrupts. This is a lesson you don't even need to go to a great law school like NYU to learn. We were all taught this in elementary school about the notion of separation of powers among the three branches of government, about the principles of checks and balances, how each is meant to keep the other from taking on too much power for itself. These divisions enable the people to protect themselves from abuses of power and infringements of their rights, because the people will be able to hold their government accountable. At its best, we've seen how this structure can create good governance. But I believe, and I unfortunately have come to believe, that it's impossible to structure a perfect political system that can protect ourselves against human frailty, predominantly frailty in the desire for self-aggrandizement. In our country, we're seeing politicians amass this power and use it for their own purposes instead of for the benefit of the people they serve. This degree of partisanship is frankly a product of gerrymandering in part. It drives political parties to their extremes, and it makes compromise a dirty word, which of course it should not be. In my career, I have often worked with people who have different political beliefs than I. Still, we're able to do things that meaningfully make life better for North Carolinians, like working with Republican attorneys general across this country on important multi-state cases, such as the work that I described earlier, the $55 billion from the opioid drug companies. That was the case which North Carolina, of which I'm the attorney general, and Tennessee, of which there was a Republican attorney general, were the two lead states. We worked extremely closely with your wonderful and talented attorney general, Tish James, in that case as well. We're also working in bipartisan fashion to hold big tech companies accountable. And we just announced a major settlement in principle with Google over its in-app purchase store. I've been working with our Republican majority in the General Assembly here in North Carolina to pass legislation to combat the opioid crisis and hold drug traffickers accountable, to create a new statewide tracking system of rape kits, and to secure funding to address the backlog of these sexual assault kits, to protect kids from child sex abuse, and to make meaningful improvements to our criminal justice system. You do not have to see eye to eye with someone about everything in order to work with them on some things. And in the process, you can get good things done for people. I genuinely believe that is how our government is supposed to work. Making government serve the people is not always easy, especially today, but truly few things that are worth it are easy. And it all starts with you. It starts with all of you as individuals, you as students, knowing who you are, knowing what you believe, and knowing how you can best make a difference. Answering those questions requires us to draw inspiration from different sources. And we all do this to different degrees. It may be your faith, your family, your experiences, or your education, or even just your imagination. The key is to draw from your source of inspiration or sources and find a way to help people improve their own lives. If that's your North Star, helping others, and you stay focused on it, I guarantee you can make progress. You will not always win. You have to understand that. Whether it's elections, court cases, legislation, or any other way in which you fight the good fight, you will not always win. And losing is never fun, but in our democracy, it's inevitable. No side always wins. That is how the system is designed to work. That not everyone seems to believe this fact is incredibly distressing. What we should do, instead of pretending like we didn't lose when we did, is to use those losses as motivation, to recommit to the values that you hold dear and get up the next day and try again harder. And that is where you and the theme of this lecture, public service, come in. The students who go to NYU are exceptionally bright. It is a tremendous law school. And so I'm confident that all or the vast majority of you will take and pass your bar exam. And I hope a number of them occur here in North Carolina. We would welcome you coming to our state. When you do take your exam and you pass it, you'll get admitted to the bar and you'll swear an oath. And in most states, that oath will require you to swear to support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States and those of the state where you practice. That oath will undergird whatever type of law you pursue. So do not only zealously defend your clients, but also zealously defend our Constitution and our democracy. Because the work to move our country to align more closely to our founding and governing principles is never ending. And we simply need more bright minds and eager hearts to advance the effort. There is no doubt that our work is cut out for us, as we are living in a time of political divisions that are intense and expressions of hate that are ugly. But remember this, that we also live in a time when lawyers stormed airports all across this country, when the unconstitutional travel ban went into effect in 2017, offering legal advice to stranded and scared travelers. We live in a time when attorneys are offering their services to women threatened for exercising their constitutional right to travel to another state in order to secure lawful reproductive health care. These lawyers are heroes too. We can move our nation in the right direction if we persevere on our paths of service and if we unite in a shared understanding of what it means to be an American. Out of many, one. It falls upon us to repair our democracy and to create a more equal and just society for ourselves and our children. Speaking of children, my son Sam, he's 24 years old. He lives in New York, and he was going to be with us this evening had I not gotten COVID and missed my trip. But there is nothing more than I want to do as a father is to build on the work that my father and his partners did to promote justice and equality in this country, so that Sam and his brother and sister, as well as each and every one of you, can live in a nation that honors the words that are carved into the building of the United States Supreme Court. Equal justice under law. It will take all of us working together to keep inching this nation closer and closer to that ideal. Too often, it may feel unattainable. Too often, it may feel like we are being dragged backward. It is undoubtedly hard work. But my goodness, it is important and rewarding work because we owe it not only to ourselves, but also to our children and grandchildren to do everything we can to make our nation stronger and more resilient and our world more peaceful and prosperous. So once you finish law school, study for that bar exam and pass it, you will be full-fledged lawyers. And I hope you keep your eyes focused on the North Star of public service. It will guide you to a fulfilling career, and even more importantly, a fulfilling life. And in the years to come, I look forward to working alongside all of you, God willing, as we stand up for what's right, fight to fix what's wrong, and do right by other people, no matter who you are. Thank you so much for your attention this evening, and I'd be honored to take some questions.
Thank you so much, Attorney General Stein. And I neglected to say at the outset that we encourage you to ask questions. So there's a microphone here. Start thinking of your question. Start lining up. Who's going to be the first person over here? You have your opportunity to ask Attorney General Stein some questions. Now, come on. This is a vigorous law school with challenging minds and independence. And I knew that there might be some resistance at the beginning, so I'll start with a question or two, but begin to line up over here. And those who are out watching virtually, use your chat room to ask questions. Some of you may have done that already. Maddie is sitting over here, and she's monitoring if any questions come in. So we'll utilize the graciousness and the opportunity of Josh Stein to receive some inquiries and questions and see what his responses are. So come on, start to line up as I throw out this first question. Now, Josh, I know in the list of problems and issues are environmental concerns. So maybe you can elucidate what some of the priority or pressing environmental issues are in North Carolina.
Thank you, Bob. Yes, happy to. We have severe drinking water challenges. One of the leading manufacturing facilities of PFAS, which are these chemicals that last forever, is outside of Fayetteville. And it has been discharging for decades into the Cape Fear River, which Cape Fear River, for those of you who know Eastern North Carolina, goes right to Wilmington. And there are hundreds of thousands of people who get their drinking water from the Cape Fear River. And so we did an extensive investigation and brought action against DuPont and Chemours for discharging this PFAS. It's called Gen X, is the specific chemical into the Cape Fear, to hold them accountable for their pollution and to make them pay for the damage they've done to North Carolina's natural resources. I brought a number of other cases, I think 6 separate cases for different locations in North Carolina where there are high concentrations of these forever chemicals, predominantly at airports or firefighting training facilities where it has been used in the firefighting foam, AFFF foam, for decades, and have brought actions against 12 different manufacturers. And all of those are in active litigation. One thing I did in conjunction with our Department of Environmental Quality is we helped to negotiate the largest excavation of coal ash in the history of the United States, 80 million tons. We have a number of old coal power plants in North Carolina where once the coal was burned and the ash was collected, it was just put on the ground, often near rivers and without any barriers to protect the coal ash from seeping into either groundwater or surface water. So we've negotiated 80 million ton excavation. It's going to all be put in lined pits and then the coal ash put back in and encapsulated to ensure that it doesn't further pollute drinking water. And then my office won a $1.1 billion settlement with Duke Energy about paying for that cleanup that will lower power bills for every customer of Duke Energy in the state of North Carolina. And then, of course, we do a lot of work on the climate crisis, whether it's at the Utilities Commission trying to promote renewable energy, or it's involving ourselves in litigation concerning federal regulations, whether it's the Clean Car Standards or Clean Power Plan rules to try to reduce carbon emissions. It's all about trying to reduce carbon emissions and promote economic opportunity in every corner of North Carolina.
Great, thanks so much, Josh. So we have a couple of people who want to further inquire of you. Yes, please tell us your name and if you're a student here at NYU.
Hi, my name is Molly. I'm in my first year at NYU, and I'm really excited to be starting. I know that voting rights are a really big legal issue happening in our country and in North Carolina. I'm wondering how you're thinking about this going into the 2024 election cycle and as you continue to work, what you're doing to address changes in voting rights.
Thank you, Holly. And I'm impressed you're at a lecture in your second or third week of law school. That shows you have the right priorities, that you can balance everything. There are a number of laws which our current Republican supermajority is pushing forward over the veto of our governor that are making it harder for people to vote by mail, making it harder for them to vote and register at the same time. They are creating a structure that is like the federal election system of oversight, which is guaranteed for gridlock. And if so, it will radically reduce early voting opportunities in North Carolina. They've even structured it in such a way as to give the legislature the ability to determine who wins or who loses close elections. All of this is exceptionally problematic. I fully anticipate there'll be litigation concerning them. I'm often in attention, and this is something that state attorneys general have to wrestle with all the time, is when the state is sued, I defend state law. But my oath is to, as I mentioned earlier, the same as yours as lawyers, is to the United States Constitution. And so if I determine that whatever law is being challenged is unconstitutional based on court rulings, then it may affect the posture I take in a specific case. Usually what happens is the office will defend the law and I will personally recuse myself so that I can take whatever action I think is appropriate.
Josh, you'll be interested to know that you've energized the crowd. We have an increasing line. Yes, sir. Tell us your name.
My name is Josh as well. I'm a first year here at NYU. My question is about the new restrictions on abortion in North Carolina and anything that your office is doing in response to that. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Josh. There have been similar restrictions on the right to vote. There have been restrictions on women's reproductive freedoms here in North Carolina. There was a reduction in access to abortion to 12 weeks. So there's a ban after 12 weeks in the state. There was a challenge that was brought on that law by Planned Parenthood. The law was incredibly sloppily drafted, which often will happen when you have a bill that is only publicly introduced, no hearing, no public input, and it was a conference report. So there was no opportunity for any amendments. And so they passed this law that had internal contradictions, clearly in violation of the Constitution. And so when the state was sued, I conceded that the plaintiffs were correct. The Republican legislature, I notified them that that was going to be my position so that if they wanted to take a contrary position, they could. Not surprisingly, they did. But meanwhile, they passed a new law that addressed many of the challenges that existed in the initial lawsuit, which was essentially a concession that their original law was unconstitutional. Now, the fact that they've reduced it to 12 weeks in and of itself is not problematic. That's a consequence of the Dobbs decision. But what it does is it places it squarely in the hands of the voters going into 2024, because the person I'm running against most likely is the lieutenant governor of North Carolina, who has said that with a willing legislature, he would completely ban abortion in every instance, including rape, incest, or the life of the mother. And so if a Republican governor is elected, they don't need a supermajority of Republicans to eliminate the access to abortion in North Carolina. Just a simple majority would do the trick. And so for the people of North Carolina, abortion truly is on the ballot.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Megan. I'm also a first-year law student here. I had a follow-up question on your environmental comment. How do you think about kind of the necessary evils of moving the country forward to clean energy? So for example, you talked about PFAS, and I actually just came from a larger battery manufacturer, and one of their main concerns is, if there is a ban on PFAS material, essentially the battery manufacturing process for lithium ion batteries would be obsolete. So just wondering what your thoughts about balancing those are.
You've hit the critical word, which is balance. I do not want the Fayetteville Works plant to go out of business, and we've been working with them, but neither can they simply discharge this into the river or emit it into the air, where it then seeps into people's well water. And it is indisputed that PFAS chemicals cause all manner of major health problems for humans. And so I think that it just needs to be done responsibly. I'm all for the lithium ion batteries. We, in fact, just Governor Cooper announced Toyota is building a massive manufacturing plant in Randolph County near Greensboro to manufacture electric vehicle batteries. And we have an EV manufacturer called VinFast, a Vietnamese company that's coming to Chatham County. And so I understand that we need to move forward. And when you have a complex economy, there are always going to be environmental challenges. The key is to just minimize the impact. I'm a supporter of nuclear power. Is nuclear power perfect? Obviously not. We still haven't figured out exactly what you do with all of the waste. But I do know that burning fossil fuels is certainly disastrous over the long term for life on this planet.
Dean, I want to congratulate you on picking a good first-year class. And by the way, the line has grown so much and the hour is getting late. So we got to speed up the questions and to make sure that people get out on time and have the refreshments and give our distinguished guest the chance to recruit. After all, he did test positive and he's not feeling so great. But let's go on. Identify yourself, please.
Sure. I'm Kahari. I'm also a first-year law student here. Briefly, I'll say that before coming here, I was working in Washington, D.C., working on health policy in the public interest, and one of my issues was tobacco control. So thank you for your advocacy on that front, helping keep e-cigarette companies to account. Another issue that I worked on back then was healthcare affordability. And you mentioned, the work taking place in North Carolina focused on Google and their app store and the competition issues there. North Carolina, among other states, has seen a bit of consolidation in the hospital industry as of late. I know that the Senate has taken some steps in North Carolina to, move some of that along. But I'm curious, from your seat in the AG's office, but potentially from the governor's mansion, what you think the realm of possibility might be for addressing some of that and advancing healthcare affordability in North Carolina.
Thank you, Kahari. There are a couple of things we need to do for healthcare affordability. One is universal coverage, so that people don't just go to an ED when they're sick, which is the most expensive way of paying for healthcare. And of course, that cost is borne by all of us. It doesn't just disappear. And that's why I fought so hard to defend the Affordable Care Act with a coalition of Democratic attorneys general all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and was immensely gratified that we won. And we've been working incredibly hard in North Carolina to expand Medicaid. And Governor Cooper has done a remarkable job. The Republican General Assembly has agreed with it. And when they enact their budget this week, our full expectation is that Medicaid will in fact be expanded in North Carolina. And I think it will be one of the only Republican states in which it was done legislatively. But to your question about getting at healthcare costs, I share your concern about the degree of consolidation. We've had more consolidated. We have one of the most consolidated healthcare systems of any state in the country. We've lost more rural hospitals than almost any other state in the country. And when you have too much consolidation, two things tend to happen. costs go up and quality goes down, which is the opposite of the preferred outcome. I have some ability to review these transactions, but my authority differs on very odd characteristics. What is the corporate structure of the hospital? Is it a municipal hospital? Is it a nonprofit hospital, or is it a for-profit hospital? What is the nature of the transaction? Is it a merger, an acquisition, or a business association? All of these things create permutations in which my authority then changes. And the lawyers who represent these hospitals are very savvy, and they can structure them in such a way as to minimize my ability to truly review with efficacy the transactions. I've championed bipartisan legislation that my office drafted that is at the legislature as we speak to make clear and strengthen my authority to conduct the reviews of the transactions to ensure that they're actually in the public interest.
Yes, sir.
My name is Ethan. I'm also a first year at law school. And I also grew up in Chapel Hill. So I've been thinking lately about the shooting at the UNC Chapel Hill campus. So I'd appreciate if you could share some steps that you've done to prevent gun violence as Attorney General, and what your stance is as a candidate for governor would be on that.
Thank you, Ethan. Did you go to Chapel High?
I went to Durham Academy.
Okay, fair enough. I've taken a number of actions to try to keep people safe from gun violence. There was litigation involving ghost guns, which are these guns where a person can buy them on the internet, 80% complete, and within a matter of minutes can assemble it so that it's a fully functioning gun, and there's no background check, and there's no serial number. This is clearly a weapon of choice for criminals, and we're seeing them, law enforcement is finding them at crime scenes with increasing prevalence. And so ensuring that the ATF rule that makes clear that ghost guns are guns is something that I have been in court litigating. Unfortunately, in North Carolina, we took a step backwards here this year. We had a law that had empowered sheriffs to engage in background checks when people bought pistols. The Republican supermajority overrode governor's veto and eliminated that law in North Carolina. So one measure that served to ensure that violent people couldn't buy guns is no longer in effect in North Carolina. I look at gun issues through the prism of public health. Kahari was asking me about e-cigarettes earlier. Take the issue of traffic, cars. After World War II, honestly, our roads were a carnage. And what did we just accept that people were dying at horrendous rates when that was the case? We did not. We engaged in a series of measured steps. We set speed limits. We had drunk driving rules. We required seatbelts. Then we required airbags. We required child safety restraints for babies. We have crash requirements, body requirements for cars. We have rumble strips on the road to alert us when we're falling asleep. We've taken literally dozens of separate measures, not any single one of which is responsible for making our roads safer, but collectively have reduced the fatalities per road mile traveled in this country by like 95%. That is hundreds of thousands of Americans alive today who would have otherwise been killed through an accident had we done nothing. And so I simply refuse to accept, we have to accept that there's just a certain number of Americans who are going to die by gun violence, which is now the leading cause of death of children in North Carolina. I mean, it's just absolutely atrocious that is now killing, guns are killing people more than cars are. And so a gun is a tool. It's a tool to which people have a constitutional right to own. But there are things that we can do that don't infringe upon that right and that respect people's right, but would take, have been shown to reduce the number of gun deaths where they have been implemented, whether it's universal background checks or whether it's a red flag law to take a gun away from somebody who shouldn't have one. They're a danger to themselves or someone else. Raising the age to buy an AR-15 to 21. You know, a 19-year-old can't buy a beer, cannot buy a cigarette, but they can buy an AR-15. Having safe storage. there have been something like 20,000 guns stolen from cars in North and South Carolina in the last few years. Who steals guns? Criminals do. Why should people put their gun in a glove box or in a trunk without it being in a safe where it can fall into the hands of criminals? It defies comprehension. There's so many things we can do that would reduce the number of people who die.
Josh, are you up to 2 more questions?
I am.
Yeah, is it okay?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we gotta spare the Attorney General.
My name's Noah. I'm actually from North Carolina as well. I was raised in Western North Carolina. I grew up in Eastern North Carolina during around the time the Gen X stuff was coming out. So, all your work on collage dump sites, Gen X, opiates, that all hits home. I was just curious if, there was any lessons learned from any of those, 3 kind of categories of cases that you were working on. Any, concrete lessons that you would like to implement should you become governor of North Carolina?
One thing that we did with the opioid money, and I was really honored, and thanks for the question, Noah, that Johns Hopkins School of Public Health analyzed all 50 states and what their plans were to use the proceeds that we have secured. And they awarded North Carolina, they recognized North Carolina and Rhode Island as having the 2 best plans. And so we've spent a great deal of time focused not only on holding the drug companies accountable, but to making sure that the money has the maximum positive impact on people's lives, because so many people are struggling. I mean, we're losing 11 North Carolinians every day to a drug overdose. I mean, that's 11 who died today on average, yesterday, the day before that, tomorrow. It's just, and every one of those 11 people have family and friends, and the impact is devastating. If any of you have met people or been touched by it, my heart goes out to you. So I firmly believe that it's not only about having good policy, but it's about excellent implementation so that you get the biggest impact possible. And that's a philosophy I will carry to the governor's office, no matter whether it's broadband expansion or it's environmental protection or it's public health and fighting the opioid crisis or anything I'm working on.
Okay, our last question.
Hello, Attorney General Stein. My name is Danny. Thank you for coming despite being sick.
Thank you.
My question to you is, the first time you ran for public office, what did you find was your biggest obstacle?
Good question. I had worked on campaigns, so I had a pretty good idea of how they operate and what it takes to win. And by the way, if any of you are interested in government, working on a campaign is an excellent way to get started. Because in our democracy, everything grows from that. In order to make policy, you have to do politics. And a lot of people think campaigning is rocket science. It usually is not. It's a lot of blocking and tackling and just doing the work. And so, I did the work. I knocked on literally thousands of doors in order to meet voters and try to introduce them to me, hear what they were concerned about, what their issues were, and it was enough to get the job done in that race.
Okay, well, first of all, let's all thank Attorney General Josh Stein. Secondly, the dean not only runs one of the great law schools in the country, I was in terror of tonight whether the technology would work, because I've been a participant in enough Zoom meetings to see failure and embarrassment and perfection, an A+, Dean. So, again, many thanks to Attorney General Josh Stein, first of all, for putting himself forward and entering the fray and being the kind of person that he is, and secondly, for being a good soldier, for notwithstanding finding out that he tested positive for COVID, is not feeling so great. He could have made the call saying, I'm not up to it, but he stayed the course, and he gave us a lot of important information tonight and hopefully inspired some of the students to enter politics in the fray. So thank you, Josh Stein. Thank all of you for coming. Let's look forward to next year.
Thank you, and Dean, thank you. And I genuinely regret not being able to visit with you all in person. And I'm very grateful that you all came and gave me this opportunity. I want to talk about the technology too. I don't know how you're doing it, but I can't hear any applause. Like the audio is so perfect and clear. NYU has its stuff together, Dean. So thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
And one final word. There's great food over there. So you not only have been entitled to listen to some great words from a terrific public-spirited public office holder, but you have an opportunity to have some refreshments, mingle, and let's look forward to a good year here at NYU. Thanks very much for coming.